He was found clutching a note that simply stated, "The truth prevails." But the truth in this case was far from simple. Mark Jenkins, a prominent local businessman known for his elaborate tall tales, was discovered dead in his lavish study on May 12, 2022, at precisely 10:30 p.m. The cause of death, a single, precise gunshot wound to the chest. This detail, the single shot, is where our investigation begins. The initial scene, as documented in the police report, suggested a break-in, perhaps a robbery gone wrong. However, the note, clutched tightly in Jenkins' hand, posed the first significant contradiction. What did it mean? And more importantly, who would leave such a message? That detail matters. Detective Harding arrived on the scene that night. The house, usually bustling with Jenkins' larger-than-life presence, was eerily quiet. Initial interviews, conducted the following morning on May 13, 2022, at 9 a.m., painted a picture of a man liked, or at least tolerated, by many. His wife, Eleanor Jenkins, claimed he was alone in the study all evening. His business partner, Richard Thorne, expressed shock, referring to Jenkins as a good if slightly embellished man. These statements were recorded, filed, and would later become crucial. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The autopsy report dated May 15, 2022, at 2 p.m., confirmed the bullet came from an antique dueling pistol, a collector's item not registered to Jenkins. This weapon, according to Eleanor, was openly displayed in his study, a peculiar choice for a man who reportedly valued safety. What doesn't add up is that the chamber was usually kept empty. So, how did a loaded antique pistol, not registered to the victim, become the murder weapon? This immediately raises an important question. If Jenkins was alone, who loaded the gun? The official version leaves this unexplained. We have a victim known for his fabrications, a cryptic note hinting at truth, and a murder weapon that seems to have materialized out of nowhere, defying the safety protocols of its very display. The timeline breaks here. Something doesn't fit. The disappearing witness. Eleanor Jenkins' initial statement, given on May 13th, was clear. She was in another part of the house, heard nothing, saw nothing. Mark was alone in his study. Case closed, or so it seemed to her. But then, on May 18th, just 5 days later, her story changed. And that's where it gets strange. In her second interview, Eleanor suddenly recalled a muffled argument, a heated exchange she'd dismissed as her husband on a business call. This contradicts her initial calm dismissal of any unusual sounds. Why the sudden, convenient shift in memory? Detective Harding noticed this discrepancy immediately. It wasn't just a change. It added a layer of complexity to an already unsettling crime scene. The victim, Mark Jenkins, a man whose life was, as we've established, a tapestry of intricate falsehoods, now appeared to have been arguing with someone just before his death. Yet, Eleanor's revised account offered no names, no faces, just a vague, convenient auditory memory. This detail matters because it opened a new line of questioning, shifting the focus from a solitary silent death to a potential confrontation. Was she protecting someone, or was she, perhaps, planting seeds of doubt? As the investigation continued, Eleanor's actions only deepened the suspicion. The timeline shows that on June 4th, barely 2 weeks after her husband's murder, Eleanor Jenkins attempted to access a significant sum from Mark's offshore accounts. Her stated reason: funeral arrangements. Financial investigators, however, noted the unusually large amount and the urgency of the transaction. For investigators, this attempt to move money, so soon after his death while still grieving, felt less like a practical necessity and more like an opportunistic maneuver. It raised an important question. Was Eleanor truly a grieving widow, or was she already looking to secure her financial future in the wake of her husband's demise, a demise she might have known more about than she initially let on? According to sources close to the investigation, this attempt triggered a deeper look into the Jenkins' financial situation, hinting that the official version of their wealth might also be just another one of Mark Jenkins' carefully constructed deceptions. The evidence was slowly building a picture of Eleanor, not as a helpless bystander, but as a potential player in a much larger game. What exactly was she trying to hide or perhaps exploit? A life examined. Mark Jenkins lived a life of carefully constructed narratives, stories, investments, even friendships, all seemingly built on sand. After his death, Detectives needed to understand the true foundation of that life, but the ground kept shifting beneath them. His wife, Eleanor, initially painted a picture of a devoted, if busy, husband, but the initial interviews were just the surface. That's where it gets strange. The official investigation, still grappling with the cryptic note and the antique pistol, began to dig deeper into Jenkins' financial world. And it was there, according to the records from May 25, 2022, that Detective Harding uncovered something crucial, a hidden compartment within Jenkins' lavish study. This wasn't just a secret drawer, it was a sophisticated hideaway. Inside, a trove of meticulously falsified financial records. Ledgers showing phantom transactions, documents detailing shell corporations, and spreadsheets designed to obscure vast sums of money. This discovery didn't just hint at minor indiscretions. It pointed to a massive embezzlement scheme, a grand deception spanning years, involving Jenkins and, alarmingly, an unidentified accomplice. This detail matters because it completely changed the scope of the investigation. No longer was this just a domestic tragedy or a personal vendetta. It was now a case entangled with high-level financial fraud. The timeline that led to Jenkins' death suddenly became much more complex, much darker. The question shifted from who would want to kill Mark Jenkins to who would want to silence him. The life Eleanor Jenkins described, a man merely prone to the first discrepancy. The death of Mark Jenkins initially baffled investigators, a prominent businessman, a cryptic note declaring the truth prevails, and an antique dueling pistol found at the scene. But the first real crack in the facade wasn't about the weapon or the note. It was about the victim himself. According to financial statements dated May 26, 2022, Detective Harding unearthed a hidden compartment within Jenkins' study. This wasn't just a secret drawer. It was a carefully constructed void behind a bookshelf. Inside, a trove of falsified financial records. These weren't minor indiscretions. This was evidence of a massive embezzlement scheme, meticulously orchestrated, involving Jenkins. What doesn't add up here is the narrative we were given, the image of Jenkins as simply a flamboyant, if embellished local figure. The paper trail tells a different story entirely, one of deep, systematic fraud, and it suggests something critical. Jenkins was not working alone. The records hinted at an unidentified accomplice, a shadowy figure woven into this intricate web of deceit. This discovery, made just weeks after his murder, dramatically shifted the investigation's focus. No longer was it a straightforward murder with potential domestic motives as initially considered. This was something far larger, a financially motivated crime, indicating potential professional enemies. This finding fundamentally changed how investigators viewed Mark Jenkins' life, transforming him from a simple casualty of a mysterious killing into a central player in a deeper, more dangerous game than anyone had realized. It also opened a critical question. If Jenkins was involved in such a large-scale criminal enterprise, who precisely was this accomplice, and what secrets were they now trying to protect or bury? The alibi unravels. The alibi. It's often the first thing scrutinized, the timeline a suspect constructs to distance themselves from a crime. For Richard Thorne, Mark Jenkins' business partner, his initial account placed him 2 hours away at a secluded fishing cabin overlooking Eagle Lake. A quiet, unassuming man, Thorne's story seemed to fit his reserved demeanor. But, as we've learned, the truth is rarely so simple, and the most obvious lies are often the hardest to spot. Detective Harding had already uncovered Jenkins' vast embezzlement scheme. Now, her attention turned to those closest to the victim, especially Thorne. His calm, almost detached grief struck some as genuine, others as practiced. According to investigation notes from June 1, 2022, Thorne maintained he was alone, enjoying the solitude of the cabin, miles from the chaos unfolding at Jenkins' estate. Yet, that solitude began to unravel with a small, seemingly insignificant detail, a receipt. A torn slip of paper from a roadside diner, dated the night of the murder. The location, less than 10 miles from Mark Jenkins' home. The signature on the bottom, Richard Thorne. Forensic handwriting experts later confirmed this, as per police records from June 1, 2022. What doesn't add up is this. If Thorne was 2 hours away, why was he buying coffee and pie a mere stone's throw from the crime scene? That detail matters. It shatters the carefully constructed facade. This discrepancy wasn't a small inconsistency, it was a gaping hole in Thorne's narrative. The official version of his movements, presented with such calm assurance, was now directly contradicted by a piece of paper, a simple diner receipt. It suggests a man who was not where he claimed to be, a man with a secret. The implications were immediate and severe. Thorne was no longer a grieving business partner, he was now a primary suspect, and this was just the beginning. Eleanor Jenkins, meanwhile, unaware of the cracks appearing in Thorne's story, was making her own moves that would soon bring her under harsh scrutiny. A pattern emerges. The alibi had unraveled, leaving Richard Thorne exposed. But then, a new piece of evidence arrived, one that didn't just point suspicion, it forged a direct link: the murder weapon itself. Ballistic reports confirmed the bullet that killed Mark Jenkins came from an antique dueling pistol, a collector's item. This detail, unearthed from the initial crime scene investigation, seemed almost too coincidental. That particular type of weapon wasn't common. What doesn't add up is Richard Thorne, the meticulous and reserved business partner, had reported an antique dueling pistol stolen just 3 months prior. It was a curious detail at the time, easily dismissed as a random theft. Now, the ballistics report from June 8, 2022, changed everything. The bullet from Jenkins' body matched the unique rifling of Thorne's stolen firearm. This wasn't an ambiguous timeline clash, this was concrete, physical evidence. Suddenly, the image of Thorne, the grieving friend, the quiet archivist, began to fracture. The police had dismissed the report of the stolen pistol as an isolated incident, but here's where it gets strange. Thorne never mentioned owning such a weapon during his initial interviews, despite its clear connection to the crime. That detail matters. A man whose life hinged on accuracy and detail was now found to have possessed the literal murder weapon and failed to disclose it. Why the omission? The evidence suggests a deliberate act, a conscious choice to mislead. This raises an important question. If Thorne had reported the pistol stolen, was this an elaborate attempt to create distance from a future crime, or simply a convenient accident? The timeline shows no immediate follow-up by police on that specific theft report, allowing it to become a quiet piece of overlooked information until now. The official version of events, once focused on Jenkins' shady dealings, now shifted dramatically towards his business partner. The careful facade of Richard Thorne, the man who valued truth and precision, was beginning to crumble under the weight of this undeniable fact. It seemed the killer who targeted liars had, in his own way, been lying all along. The missing files. The ballistics report was clear. The antique dueling pistol, definitively linked to Richard Thorne, was the murder weapon. This piece of evidence closed one loop, and as often happens in these cases, immediately opened several more. Thorne's carefully constructed alibi, his feigned shock, all of it began to unravel. But a deeper question lingered: why this particular weapon? And why had Thorne claimed it stolen months prior, a fact Detective Harding couldn't shake? That's where it gets strange. Harding, accustomed to finding answers in the present, returned to the past. She began sifting through dusty, inactive files, cross-referencing names, looking for anything that might connect Thorne to a hidden motive beyond the obvious financial scheme. Historical police records, specifically those detailing financial crimes and disappearances from a decade prior, became her target. She focused her search on cases involving individuals who had worked in similar financial sectors as Jenkins and Thorne. This meticulous, almost archaeological dig into old cases finally yielded a name: Arthur Finch, a financial analyst who had vanished without a trace 10 years ago. Finch, a meticulous chess player known for his color-coded filing system, had been working to expose an embezzlement scheme that, according to the archived reports, bore striking resemblances to Jenkins' operation. But here's the critical detail. Public records indicated Finch had worked for Richard Thorne before joining Jenkins' firm. The timeline suddenly stretched backward, implicating Thorne in a narrative far broader than just the murder of Mark Jenkins. It suggested a pattern, a hidden history Harding was only beginning to uncover. The official version up until now had been focused on a recent crime, a recent motive. That detail matters because the deeper Harding dug into Finch's disappearance, the more Thorne's character, his meticulousness, his obsession with detail, began to take on a far more sinister meaning. What the documents revealed was not just a connection, but a potential motive rooted in a decade-old cover-up for a man obsessed with lies. The investigation into Mark Jenkins' murder was no longer confined to a single act of violence. It had just reopened the cold case of Arthur Finch. The interrogation tapes. The note, clutched in Mark Jenkins' hand, read, "The truth prevails." For weeks, investigators had treated it as a final, desperate message from the victim, a silent accusation against his killer. But forensic handwriting experts confirmed it was written by Thorne, not Jenkins. That's not a small inconsistency. The phrase itself, "the truth prevails," was a common saying of Richard Thorne's, a detail unearthed from old psychiatric evaluations from his youth. What doesn't add up is why Thorne, the meticulous and seemingly composed businessman, would leave such a clear signature of his presence at the scene. According to the interrogation protocol from June 14, 2022, Thorne maintained his elaborate innocence. His performance during those hours of questioning was, to many in the room, oddly theatrical, a facade of calm defiance. He claimed Jenkins was trying to frame him, alleging Jenkins had stolen his antique dueling pistol, the very weapon that ended Mark Jenkins' life. The pistol, which Thorne had reported stolen 3 months prior, was found in a lake near his fishing cabin, wrapped in a waterproof bag containing his fingerprints. This contradicts Thorne's claims of it being stolen. The record shows a premeditated attempt to obscure his involvement, not an act of a framed man. The interrogation tapes reveal a man who, despite overwhelming evidence, stubbornly adhered to a version of events that stretched the bounds of credulity. He denied writing the note, even when confronted with undeniable forensic evidence. This raises an important question: why lie about something so easily verifiable? The timeline shows Thorne's alibi crumbling, his own supposed weapon recovered with his fingerprints, and his personal motto left at the scene. Yet, he continued to deny. It suggests a deeper motivation for his deception, something beyond merely avoiding a murder charge. Let me walk you through what happened. The police had a suspect, a motive tied to financial fraud and a weapon, but Thorne's unwavering denial, his almost pathological insistence on a fabricated narrative, hinted at a deeper, more personal commitment to his version of the truth. What was he so desperately trying to hide, even in the face of the truth prevailing? His repeated insistence that Jenkins had stolen his pistol, that he was the victim of a setup, it almost sounded like a projection. A deep-seated resentment against the very concept of deceit. Perhaps that detail matters, because it implies a motive that goes far beyond simple financial gain or self-preservation. The confession's flaw. Richard Thorne finally broke June 18, 2022, 1 p.m. The confession came not as a sudden outpouring, but as a slow, deliberate unraveling under the weight of accumulated evidence. Thorne admitted to killing Mark Jenkins, but not for the reasons initially assumed. His motive was far more complex, rooted in a pathological hatred of liars. Psychiatric evaluations from Thorne's youth elaborated on this deep-seated resentment, stemming from a childhood trauma where his family was ruined by a con artist. Jenkins' pervasive dishonesty, combined with his pending exposure of Thorne's past financial frauds and his involvement in the Arthur Finch case, became unbearable. The official version of the crime, a simple business dispute gone wrong, left this crucial psychological dimension unexplained. Thorne confessed to staging the scene to appear like a warning to liars, the cryptic note, "The truth prevails," an ironic touch, given his own deceptions. The note had been confirmed by forensic handwriting experts to be written by Thorne, not Jenkins. What doesn't add up is the initial theatrical performance during his interrogation just days prior. During that tense interrogation on June 14, 2022, Thorne maintained his innocence, claiming Jenkins was trying to frame him and had stolen his pistol. He denied writing the note. Yet, the ballistics report confirmed on June 8, 2022, matched the bullet from Jenkins' body to a specific antique dueling pistol owned by Thorne, a gun he had reported stolen months prior. This wasn't a small inconsistency. His confession now 4 days later directly contradicts that denial. It raises an important question: if his motive was a twisted moral crusade against liars, why the elaborate lie to Detective Harding just days before? The evidence suggests Thorne wasn't just driven by a hatred of deceit, he was also a master of it. The confession's flaw, its delayed nature and prior theatrics, reveals not a simple breakdown, but a calculated shift in strategy, a final desperate attempt to control the narrative, even in admitting guilt. The lingering question. Richard Thorne murdered Mark Jenkins. He confessed. He had a pathological hatred of liars, a hatred so deep it drove him to kill. Thorne's carefully constructed facade of integrity shattered, revealing a man who believed he was serving a twisted form of justice. But the truth, as always, is rarely that simple. The closing of the Jenkins murder case, while a victory for Detective Harding, opened a far more unsettling file. The cold case of Arthur Finch, the financial analyst who vanished a decade prior, was officially reopened. Thorne was now the prime suspect. This was not just about Mark Jenkins, it was about a pattern, a dark thread extending back years. What does this wider context tell us about Thorne's true motivations? And more importantly, what does it reveal about the lies we collectively overlook? Harding, according to historical police records, had always felt something was off about the Finch disappearance. The original witness, a homeless man, had been dismissed as unreliable. But now, with Thorne's confession, that witness's claim that he saw Thorne arguing with Finch shortly before he vanished gained chilling credibility. The system had for years failed to see the most obvious deception: Thorne's own carefully crafted persona. This case becomes a stark reminder that the official narrative can sometimes miss the forest for the trees, focusing so intensely on immediate events that it ignores a deeper, more disturbing pathology. The investigation into Finch's disappearance continues. Thorne is formally charged with the murder of Jenkins and multiple counts of financial fraud. The legal process will run its course, but the lingering question remains: how many other lies did Thorne silence? How many other deceptions did he witness, and what were the triggers? Was Jenkins the first, or merely the latest in a series of acts by a man driven by a profound, destructive moral code? The evidence log will continue to follow the reopened Finch case as new details emerge. This case may be closed for now, but the questions it raises about perception, truth, and the unseen architects of violence will undoubtedly echo for years to come. If you find value in these deep dives into the hidden structures of true crime, please like this video and subscribe to the evidence log for more investigations.